In this video edition, I will try to demystify the two-way data binding in Angular. Interestingly, that this syntax you currently see is just a shortened variation of the following notation. It is applying the ngModel directive itself, because ngModel is just a simple Angular directive. It provides the value for the ngModel directive property that has the same name as the directive selector, and it is an event binding where the event name consists of the name of some input. In our case, it is ngModel input, and it has a suffix change. And also, the event handler for this event just updates the property we provide for the directive input with this new emitted event. And this part is also shorthand for the more familiar notation you probably use more often, where you create some handler function, then you provide the emitted value, and inside the method body you update the property that you provide as a value for the corresponding input. And if you go to the browser, you will see that nothing has changed and the ngModel works as it was working before without any errors or issues. If you check the source code of the ngModel, you will find all those properties I mentioned. As you can see here, there is a ngModel directive selector. Then if we scroll a little bit down, you can find an input that has the same name as the directive selector name. And here is the output that follows the naming convention I mentioned. So it is a name of some property like ngModel, and additionally it has a suffix change. So that's why everything works fine. But obviously it is not something that works only with ngModel directive, and you can implement two-way data binding for any Angular component or directive input. For instance, let's implement it for the project footer component. Yeah, it doesn't make too much sense, but it is just for learning purposes. For instance, let's say that instead of this getter, which why did I do that? Actually, it would be better to have it as a regular property instead of getter, but anyway, yeah, let's imagine that instead of the getter, I want to have it as a regular component input. So let's quickly do that. All right. And yeah, this year will be definitely printed here in the template, in the copyright. So it means that now I have to also modify slightly the app component where I use the actual application footer component, and I have to provide the copyright year as an input like this. And of course, I have to also create the dedicated property inside the app component TS file. So let's go there and do it. So we will get something like that. And the application footer component should work as before without any changes. And indeed, if we go there, you can see that everything works fine. Now, as I said, in order to implement two-way data binding, we have to create an Angular output that follows some special naming convention. So let's go there and create a new Angular output property where the name consists of the input property name that should support two-way data binding, right? And then it should have a change suffix. Just make sure that you write it in camel case format. And once you have that, then you can go and implement the two-way data binding construction in your template. So here we go. And now the copyright year property value will be changed in two cases. When we either change it right in the application component class, or when the footer component emits a value via year change output. For instance, let's imagine that, I don't know, when user clicks on the footer component, I want to increase the copyright year, whatever, and it will work. If we go to the browser, you can see that I click and the copyright year increases. However, the two-way data binding doesn't work yet, even though currently we applied the two-way data binding syntax for this input right here in the app component template. I can even prove my statement by printing out the copyright year property here somewhere down below. So let me drop maybe some text here to make it more clear where this value comes. And if two-way data binding works, then the value of copyright year property in app component should be synchronized with the value from the footer component year property. But if you go to the browser, you can see that changes only the value inside the footer, but the property of app component remains the same. This is because currently we just modify the value of the footer component property, so the change isn't visible to the parent. If we want to enable two-way data binding, we have to emit this new value via the event emitter, just like that. And that's it. Now we can go and test it. So if I jump to my application, you can see that our values are synchronized, which means that two-way data binding perfectly works. So basically, two-way data binding under the hood is already familiar for us input-output interface, which does something like data round trip, where the value emitted by child is being assigned to the parent property, which is actually an input value for the component that emitted the change. Yeah? So in such a way, this year property that belongs to footer component will be also updated with this new emitted value. But instead of having additionally, this event listeners and callbacks, and in callbacks we have to update the property. Instead of all those stuff, we have this short and nice two-way data binding syntax.